On a sweltering August day in 1976, Art Peterson, a beloved mailman in Maple Creek, Ohio, simply vanished. His mail truck was found idling, its contents untouched, a chilling tableau of an ordinary day gone terribly wrong. For 47 agonizing years, Art's disappearance became a haunting local legend, a whisper of a mystery that time refused to explain. His family was left with nothing but an empty chair and a gnawing uncertainty. The earth itself seemed to have swallowed him whole. That is until a crisp autumn morning when City Park gardener Marcus Thorne, meticulously uprooting an ancient ailing oak, felt something unusual beneath its sprawling roots. What he and his apprentice unearthed wasn't just a lost artifact. It was Art Peterson's heavily weathered U.S. mail shoulder bag, buried deep within the earth for nearly half a century. Inside that bag, a hidden compartment held a secret that would not only rewrite the tragic history of Art's vanishing, but would expose a dark truth, bringing justice to a man long gone, and answering a question that had lingered for generations. The calendar marked August 15, 1976. A quintessential summer day in Maple Creek, Ohio. The sun beat down with a gentle warmth, ripening backyard tomatoes and baking the asphalt roads of Maple Creek, a quiet, tree-lined suburb where life moved at a comfortable, predictable pace. It was here, in this picture of idyllic Americana, that Art Peterson, at 32 years old, embodied the very spirit of his community. Art wasn't just a mailman, he was an institution, a beloved fixture in the daily lives of Maple Creek residents. Each morning he donned his crisp U.S. Postal Service uniform, its familiar blue a beacon of reliability on his meticulously planned route. His sturdy canvas mailbag, a seasoned veteran of countless deliveries, swung comfortably at his side as he navigated the familiar streets. He knew every dog, every garden, and every family, often by name. His days were a symphony of small, meaningful interactions. A cheerful whistle often preceded his arrival, a melody that signaled the day's news, bills, or eagerly awaited letters. He'd wave to Mrs. Henderson, a woman whose prize-winning roses were the envy of the neighborhood, offering a compliment that always brought a blush to her cheeks. He'd share a quick joke with Mr. O'Malley about the Cincinnati Reds, their shared passion for baseball forging a casual camaraderie. Art was, in every sense, the quintessential American good guy, dependable, kind, and deeply woven into the fabric of his community. He was a proud union worker, active in local events, and a man who meticulously planned not just his postal route, but his future. That morning, like so many others, began with the soft light of dawn, spilling into the small, cozy home Art shared with his fiancée, Emily Davies. At 30, Emily was a woman of quiet strength and bright eyes, her laughter a comforting sound to Art. They sat at their kitchen table, the scent of percolating coffee filling the air, a newspaper spread between them. Their conversation drifted, as it often did, to their upcoming wedding. 2 months, Art, Emily had murmured, tracing a finger over a picture of a quaint farmhouse for sale in the real estate section. Do you think we could make that work? Art smiled, his gaze soft as he looked at her. We'll make it work, Em. Our little patch of heaven, maybe a dog, a couple of kids running around. Their dreams were simple, tangible, built on a foundation of shared love and quiet ambition. Emily had playfully teased him about his meticulous route planning, suggesting he applied the same precision to their wedding arrangements. Art had just chuckled, a deep, contented sound. Before he left for the day, he'd scribbled a note on a small pad and stuck it to the fridge with a magnet. Love you, Em. See you at 5:30. Dinner on me tonight. It was a simple gesture, yet one that spoke volumes of their unwavering connection, a promise whispered into the quiet morning air. Before heading to the postal sorting office, Art made a quick, heartfelt phone call to his younger sister, Sarah Peterson Miller. Sarah, then 25, was Art's confidant and closest sibling. They spoke about their plans for a family dinner that upcoming weekend, a regular ritual of shared meals and laughter. Sarah, with her characteristic teasing, had reminded him, "Don't be late, big brother. We're counting on your famous potato salad," Art had promised, his voice warm with affection. The conversation was brief, ordinary, yet it underscored the profound warmth and normalcy of their bond, a snapshot of a vibrant family life. After his morning rituals, Art arrived at the Maple Creek post office, a bustling hub of activity. He meticulously sorted the day's mail, each letter and package destined for a specific address, a specific life. He then loaded his mail truck, a familiar white vehicle with the blue eagle emblem, ensuring every tray and bin was perfectly in place. His route was a finely tuned machine, honed over years of dedicated service. He started his deliveries, moving with his usual efficiency. He delivered bills, birthday cards and magazines, each drop-off a small, almost invisible thread connecting the community. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows from the towering oak trees that lined Maple Creek's streets. The day unfolded as any other, until a specific, slightly unusual delivery marked a deviation from Art's routine. Deep in his mailbag was a special package, requiring a signature addressed to a dilapidated industrial garage unit on the very edge of his sector. This was not a regular stop for Art. The address, a rusty, faded number on the side of a decaying brick building, was rarely on his manifest. He remembered looking at it earlier, a flicker of mild annoyance or perhaps curiosity crossing his face. It was just a few blocks off his typical path near the boundary of Maple Creek Park. A minor inconvenience, he likely thought, a momentary detour in his otherwise flawless route. He pulled his mail truck to the side of the road, the engine idling, the air heavy with the scent of summer and the faint exhaust of his vehicle. He grabbed the special package and his mailbag, stepped out and headed towards the worn, corrugated metal door of the garage, the last known moments of his ordinary life. The hours that followed were defined by a creeping sense of unease that slowly escalated into a full-blown panic. 5:30 came and went, then 6, then 7. Art Peterson, the man who was never late, the man who never missed a dinner, never called. Emily Davies, initially dismissing his absence as an unexpected delay, grew increasingly agitated. She tried his office, then friends, then hospitals, her voice growing tighter with each unanswered call. She paced the small living room, the handwritten note on the fridge, a cruel taunt of a promise. Unkept. Meanwhile, at the Peterson-Miller household, Sarah's attempts to reach her brother also met with silence. The comfortable feeling from their morning phone call began to unravel, replaced by a cold dread. They both independently called the Maple Creek Police Department. Their initial reports met with the polite but firm advice to wait a few more hours. But the waiting was unbearable. As twilight deepened into night, painting the familiar streets in eerie shadows, a shocking discovery solidified their fears. Art Peterson's U.S. Postal Service mail truck was found abandoned, not far from the dilapidated industrial garage. It sat idly near the northern edge of Maple Creek Park. The engine purred quietly, its tires resting on the soft grass shoulder of the road. The driver's side door was ajar, a small detail that spoke volumes. Inside the truck, the scene was unsettlingly normal, yet profoundly wrong. Mail trays, still full, were neatly stacked on the passenger seat. Some, letters spilling out, resting innocently on the worn upholstery. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, no obvious chaos. It was as if Art had simply stepped out for a moment, intending to return, but he never did. The only thing missing was Art Peterson himself. The initial confusion quickly transformed into a chilling, widespread panic. The sun had long set, casting the park in an almost theatrical darkness, highlighting the eerie silence. Emily and Sarah, arriving at the scene, were met with the harsh reality. Their faces, once etched with concern, were now contorted with dawning horror. The sight of the empty truck, a symbol of Art's dedicated routine, now stood as a stark monument to his sudden, inexplicable absence. Arthur Peterson had simply vanished, leaving behind only questions and an unbearable silence. The calendar marked August 15th, 1976, a quintessential summer day in Maple Creek, Ohio. The sun beat down with a gentle warmth, ripening backyard tomatoes and baking the asphalt roads of Maple Creek, a quiet, tree-lined suburb where life moved at a comfortable, predictable pace. It was here, in this picture of idyllic Americana, that Art Peterson, at 32 years old, embodied the very spirit of his community. His mail truck, found abandoned, engine idling, its contents untouched, had solidified their fears. The initial confusion quickly transformed into a chilling, widespread panic. The sun had long set, casting the park in an almost theatrical darkness, highlighting the eerie silence. Emily and Sarah, arriving at the scene, were met with the harsh reality. Their faces, once etched with concern, were now contorted with dawning horror. Art Peterson had simply vanished, leaving behind only questions and an unbearable silence. The discovery of Art's abandoned truck triggered a massive, immediate response. Maple Creek, a town unaccustomed to such profound mysteries, mobilized. Search parties, composed of volunteers from the community, alongside uniformed officers, fanned out across Maple Creek Park and the surrounding suburban streets. They combed through every bush, every ditch, every patch of woods, their voices calling Art's name into the deepening night. The air was thick with a desperate urgency. But as hours turned into days and days into weeks, the hope began to thin. News reports flashed Art's smiling face across television screens and newspaper front pages, appealing for any information, no matter how small. Yet, the calls that came in led nowhere. The Maple Creek Police Department, then operating with the technology of the mid-1970s, faced immense challenges. There were no widespread DNA databases, no sophisticated forensic tools capable of extracting information from trace evidence like today. Digital communication was rudimentary, limiting the speed and breadth of information sharing. The investigation relied heavily on traditional methods, door-to-door inquiries, witness interviews, and meticulous ground searches. But Art Peterson had left behind almost nothing. The mail truck, though abandoned, showed no signs of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. There was no ransom note, no demand, no indication of a struggle. It was as if he had simply stepped out of his life and evaporated into thin air. The initial theories entertained by investigators quickly collapsed under the weight of logical scrutiny. Could Art have run away? Those who knew him, his fiancée Emily, his sister Sarah, his colleagues at the post office, vehemently dismissed the idea. Art was deeply rooted in his community, planning a wedding, building a future. There was no financial distress, no personal turmoil that suggested he would abandon everything. Was it a random act of violence? Possible, but the scene offered no clues to support it. No weapon, no blood, no signs of a struggle. A professional kidnapping? The lack of any demands made this theory increasingly unlikely as time wore on. Art Peterson's disappearance defied easy explanation. Among the officers assigned to the case was a young, eager detective, John Miller. In 1976, Miller was fresh-faced, full of optimism, and determined to solve every case that landed on his desk. But Art Peterson's case was different. Years later, speaking from the vantage point of retirement, his voice still carried the weight of that unsolved mystery. "It was like he evaporated," Miller would recount, his gaze distant. "Every lead hit a wall. It was one of those cases that stuck with you, haunting you. You'd go home, and you'd think about the family, about the void left behind. It was a failure that stayed with me, a feeling of letting them down. Miller's personal regret was palpable. He described sleepless nights, poring over meager reports, replaying the scenario in his mind, searching for the one detail he might have missed. The case became an indelible scar on his professional record, a constant reminder of the limits of policing when faced with a silence so profound. For the Peterson family, the immediate shock of Art's disappearance was just the beginning of a prolonged agony. Years turned into decades, each one deepening the void left by his absence. The initial frantic search faded into a grim acceptance of the unknown, but acceptance did not bring peace. A poignant montage of time passing would tell their story. Photographs of Sarah Peterson Miller and Emily Davies, their faces slowly aging, lines of worry etched around their eyes. Empty chairs at family gatherings, birthday cakes with missing candles, each silent reminder a fresh stab of pain. Sarah Peterson Miller, now 72, spoke decades later with a voice that still trembled with residual pain, a testament to the unyielding grip of unresolved grief. It wasn't just losing Art, it was losing a future, she explained, her eyes welling with tears. Every holiday, every family gathering, there was an empty chair. My parents, they never fully recovered. They died with that question hanging over them, that unbearable uncertainty. Sarah described how the disappearance consumed her. For years, she became obsessed, a self-appointed amateur detective driven by love and desperation. She would call the Maple Creek police station monthly, then quarterly, then annually, always hoping for a new lead, a glimmer of hope. She sifted through old newspaper clippings, her fingers tracing the faded headlines, desperately seeking any shred of information that might have been overlooked. Her relentless pursuit was a quiet, private torment, a life lived in the shadow of a phantom. Emily Davies, Art's fiancée, also found herself adrift in a sea of unaddressed grief. Now 70, she lived a quiet life, marked by an absence that defined her existence. I tried to move on. I had to, Emily confessed, her voice soft but firm. But how do you mourn someone who's just gone? There's no grave to visit, no final farewell. Every time the phone rang, every time I saw a mail truck, my heart would jump. It wasn't fair to Art or to us to just let him become a forgotten statistic. Emily spoke of the struggle to find closure without a body, without answers. The life they had meticulously planned, the future filled with children and a little farmhouse, vanished with Art. She never truly dated anyone else, her heart seemingly locked in a perpetual state of waiting. Her quiet life was a testament to the enduring power of first love and the unique burden of ambiguous loss. Years turned into decades, each one deepening the void left by Art. Life went on, as it always does, but the milestones that followed were bittersweet, tinged with his absence, forever marked by the question of what might have been. A stark photograph captures Sarah Peterson Miller's wedding day. She is radiant in her white gown, surrounded by loved ones, but there is a poignant, almost imperceptible empty space next to her, where Art, her beloved big brother, should have stood, perhaps as her escort, certainly as a beaming witness. It was a beautiful ceremony, but a profound absence lingered. Art Peterson missed Sarah's wedding. He missed the birth of her son, David, a name partly chosen in his honor, a quiet tribute to the uncle who never got to meet his nephew. He missed countless Thanksgivings, Christmases, and birthdays, the simple joy of watching his family grow older, prosper, and create new memories. His family mourned not just his physical absence, but the countless unlived moments, the future he was robbed of, and the profound, irreversible loss for those who loved him. The silence was deafening, the unanswered question a constant, aching reminder of a life unjustly cut short, and a family forever marked by a mystery that seemed destined to remain unsolved. Decades later, the stage was set for an unexpected revelation. The calendar read a crisp October day in the present year. 47 years after Art Peterson vanished. The setting was Maple Creek Park, the very same expanse of green where Art's abandoned mail truck had been discovered so long ago. Here, an ancient, sprawling oak tree, a silent witness to countless seasons, now stood ailing. Its grand branches, once vibrant with life, were brittle with disease, posing a risk to park visitors. The city had made the difficult decision. The tree, though beloved, had to be removed. This daunting task fell to Marcus Thorne, a man whose quiet diligence was matched only by his deep respect for nature. In his 50s, with calloused hands and a keen eye, Marcus was a veteran city park gardener, intimately familiar with the rhythms of the earth. Alongside him was Maya Rodriguez, his energetic and observant apprentice, in her 20s, eager to learn the meticulous art of urban horticulture. Their work on this particular day was painstaking. Removing a tree of this magnitude was no simple felling. It required heavy machinery, yes, but also a delicate touch, a careful extraction of the immense root system to prevent any damage to the surrounding park infrastructure, the network of buried pipes, and the nearby walking paths. Marcus, ever the teacher, explained to Maya the importance of preserving the root ball, not just for disposal, but to minimize disturbance to the soil and any hidden history it might hold. The excavator's claw moved with a surprising grace, carefully pulling at the tenacious, gnarled roots, each one a testament to decades of slow, silent growth. Marcus supervised closely, his gaze fixed on the earth as it gave way. He often felt the vibrations through the ground, the subtle resistance of the soil, the deep pull of the roots. But then, a different sensation registered. Beneath one of the thickest, most sprawling root clusters, he spotted an anomaly, an unusual dark mass. It was deeply embedded, almost swallowed by the wood, appearing at first like an ancient piece of industrial debris or a very old waterlogged log. Its irregular shape was intriguing. He signaled for the excavator to pause, then instructed Maya to approach with smaller, more precise tools. "Careful, Maya," he murmured, his voice low, a note of curiosity in it. "There's something here. Might be nothing, just an old bit of buried junk." The reveal was slow and deliberate, designed to prevent any damage. They worked with trowels and gloved hands, gently scraping away the tenacious mud and soil that clung to the object. Bit by bit, the dark mass began to yield its identity. As Maya wiped away a particularly stubborn clump of earth, her breath hitched, her fingers brushed against a coarse, sturdy fabric, then a smooth, worn leather strap, and then, unmistakable, emerging from the grime, was a faded stencil. U.S. Mail. Marcus's eyes widened in disbelief. He looked at Maya, his face a mixture of shock and reverence, his usual calm demeanor momentarily shattered. "Maya," he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. "This isn't just a bag. This is a mailbag. An old one." Maya's initial confusion morphed into wide-eyed realization as she fully grasped the significance of the aged leather and canvas. The air seemed to thick with the weight of the moment. They shared a stunned silence, their minds reeling, instinctively understanding that they had unearthed something profoundly important. With utmost care, they carried the heavily weathered bag to a cleaner area of the park, a sturdy workbench set up for their tools. Their handling of the artifact was almost reverent, as if they were cradling a fragment of lost time. The canvas was stiff and discolored, the leather straps cracked and darkened from decades of subterranean burial. It smelled of damp earth and something else, something old and forgotten. Marcus, his hands surprisingly steady, unbuckled the main flap of the bag. The contents, as expected, were largely decayed. Muddy, waterlogged letters, their ink long bled into illegibility, were crammed inside, along with other, unidentifiable fibrous scraps. "It's been here a long, long time," Marcus murmured, his voice hollow. The mundane remnants of a mail carrier's day, now transformed into archaeological curiosities, spoke of the immense passage of time. As Maya carefully, almost delicately, sifted through the debris, her fingers brushed against something unusual. It was a stiff, unnatural seam in the inner lining of the bag, expertly sewn, designed to be inconspicuous. She looked up at Marcus, her brow furrowed. "Marcus, feel this. There's something here under the lining." Marcus knelt, his experienced fingers tracing the hidden stitching. It felt deliberate, purposeful. He retrieved a small utility knife from his belt. With meticulous precision, he carefully cut along the seam, the stitches giving way with a soft tearing sound. Slowly, a hidden, zippered compartment was revealed, cleverly integrated into the bag's design. A secret within a secret. With bated breath, they unzipped the small compartment. Nestled inside, miraculously preserved within what appeared to be a waterproofed pouch, were two items. The first was a small, leather-bound ledger. Despite the dampness, it was surprisingly intact, its pages filled with what appeared to be cryptic codes, columns of dates, and unsettlingly precise monetary figures. Some entries included vague, unsettling nicknames like the Duke and Slink. It was clearly not a typical mailman's log. The second item was even more astonishing, a single half-smoked cigarette butt. Its paper was slightly discolored, but remarkably preserved, likely due to the sealed environment of the pouch and the anaerobic conditions within the tree roots. Marcus and Maya exchanged a profound look. The air grew heavy with unspoken implications. This wasn't just a lost mailbag that had been swallowed by the earth. The hidden compartment, the strange ledger hinting at illicit dealings, and the perfectly preserved cigarette butt. It all screamed of something far more sinister than a simple disappearance. This was not an accident. This was a crime scene, unearthed nearly half a century later. They immediately understood the gravity of their discovery. This wasn't something for the park department. This needed to go straight to the police. The discovery of that mailbag in such an improbable place left investigators with more questions than answers. It's incredible how a single detail can rewrite history. If you enjoy cases like this, subscribe to the channel and follow every twist and turn. The heavily weathered U.S. mail shoulder bag, a relic of a bygone era, was carefully transported from the park to the Maple Creek Police Department. Its arrival at the cold case unit marked a pivotal moment. Here, in a quiet section of the station, Detective Lena Hayes, a sharp and observant veteran of intricate investigations, stood ready. Her partner, Detective Ben Carter, already engrossed in a multi-monitor setup, looked up as a uniformed officer delivered the package. The silence in the unit was broken only by the hum of computers and the quiet rustle of old files being pulled. The moment the mailbag arrived, the dusty files of the Art Peterson case were pulled from storage. For decades, they had sat undisturbed, a thick, forgotten testament to a mystery that had resisted every attempt at resolution. But now, after 47 years of dormancy, a new generation of investigators was ready to apply modern science and fresh perspectives to a very old, very cold mystery. Lena Hayes approached the evidence table, her gaze fixed on the canvas bag. She ran a gloved hand over the faded U.S. mail stencil, her mind already calculating the weight of the years, the elements, and the challenges ahead. 1976, she murmured, recognizing the style of the bag, the faint, almost ghostly echo of a tragedy long past. Ben joined her, his expression a mix of curiosity and professional caution. Lena nodded, her brow furrowed in thought. It is. And the fact that it was hidden, not just lost, changes everything. She expressed cautious optimism, aware that while the discovery was monumental, working with evidence that had endured nearly 5 decades buried in tree roots would be immensely difficult. Degradation, contamination, and the sheer passage of time were formidable adversaries to forensic analysis. The mailbag and its extraordinary contents were immediately transferred to the state-of-the-art forensic laboratory. Here, under pristine conditions, the true work began. Every fiber, every particle, every hidden detail was subjected to the scrutiny of modern science. The laboratory hummed with focused activity as technicians, clad in protective gear, meticulously processed the artifacts. The half-smoked cigarette butt, remarkably preserved within its waterproofed pouch, became the immediate priority. It was a tangible link to a moment, perhaps even a person, from nearly half a century ago. Forensic scientists carefully extracted what little organic material remained from the filter. The process was painstaking, a testament to the advancements in DNA analysis. From the minuscule cellular traces, they were able to construct a partial male DNA profile. This profile was then uploaded to CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, a national database that links DNA profiles from unsolved crimes to known offenders and other forensic evidence. It was a standard, vital step in cold cases, offering the tantalizing possibility of an immediate match. However, as is often the case with such old, cold trails, no immediate direct match was found. This did not deter the team. It simply meant the path to identification would be more complex, perhaps requiring familial searches or further investigative leads. It was a common initial hurdle, but certainly not a dead end. Simultaneously, Ben Carter, with his sharp digital forensics background, turned his attention to the leather-bound ledger. Its cryptic entries were a puzzle demanding a specialist's touch. He collaborated with a linguistic expert, a retired FBI codebreaker who had spent decades deciphering the hidden languages of organized crime. Together, they meticulously analyzed the coded phrases, the seemingly random sequences of numbers, and the unusual abbreviations. Through sophisticated pattern recognition software and painstaking cross-referencing with old local business records, a picture began to emerge. The ledger was not merely a jumble of codes. It was a meticulously kept record of illegal activities. The entries clearly pointed to drug transactions, specific weights of illicit substances, precise prices, and dates corresponding to significant drug movements in the region during the mid-1970s. The vague nicknames, the Duke and Slink, appeared with alarming frequency, consistently linked to the largest transactions. These were clearly not minor players. They were central figures in the operation. The ledger was, in essence, a criminal diary. While the ledger and the cigarette butt held the most immediate promise, the mailbag itself, even in its state of decay, offered subtle but crucial insights. Most of the waterlogged letters were beyond salvage, their addresses and contents dissolved by time and moisture. Yet one partially intact letter caught Lena Hayes's discerning eye. Its address was still discernible, pointing to a known local figure who, in the 1970s, was rumored to have shadowy connections and a history with illicit dealings. The significance of this particular letter was profound. It was undelivered. This simple fact suggested that Art Peterson had been intercepted before he could complete his route. He hadn't just gone missing from his home or a random location. He had disappeared while actively engaged in his duties, on his route with his mailbag, heading toward a specific, undelivered package. Each painstakingly recovered piece of evidence, each detail painstakingly analyzed, began to paint a picture starkly different from the initial assumptions that had plagued the original investigation. The long-held theory that Art Peterson might have simply ran away was utterly debunked. The discovery of a drug ledger in his mailbag, complete with cryptic transaction records, made it clear that Art was not fleeing his life. He had stumbled into something dangerous, something clandestine. The presence of the hidden compartment, the illicit ledger, and the undelivered mail unequivocally implied a struggle, an ambush, or a direct confrontation. This was not a random disappearance, it was a targeted incident, strongly suggesting murder, not just a missing person. Art Peterson was no runaway. He was an honest man who had inadvertently become entangled in a perilous underworld. The focus of the investigation underwent a dramatic and necessary shift. What was once classified as a missing person cold case was now reclassified as a homicide, almost certainly connected to organized crime or drug trafficking from the 1970s. Lena and Ben, armed with the names The Duke and Slink from the ledger, began to systematically build profiles on these individuals. They delved into old police records, archived newspaper articles, and court documents from the 1970s and 80s. Their research quickly yielded results. The Duke was identified as Roy Dubois, a man who, in the 1970s, was a known small-time local enforcer and a figure on the periphery of Maple Creek's criminal underbelly. Yet surprisingly, Dubois had seemingly reinvented himself. In the present day, he was known as a seemingly respectable elderly businessman, running several legitimate enterprises. The transformation was striking, almost too clean. Slink was identified as Silas Jenkins, Dubois' notorious right-hand man. Jenkins had a reputation for violence and unpredictability, a true enforcer who operated without moral restraint. However, the records also revealed a crucial detail. Silas Jenkins had died years ago in prison, serving a sentence for an unrelated charge. His death meant he could not face justice, but his identity was vital to understanding the full scope of Dubois' operations and Art's fate. The cold case, long dormant, was now crackling with new life. Lena and Ben possessed not just a clue, but a complete reframing of the crime. The path forward was clear. Confront the past, follow the money, and trace the connections to Roy Dubois and his former enforcer. The mailbag, swallowed by the earth for nearly 5 decades, had finally delivered its message, promising answers to a mystery that had haunted Maple Creek for generations. The discovery of the mailbag and its hidden ledger had profoundly reoriented the investigation. What was once a cold missing persons case had transformed into an active homicide inquiry, its tendrils reaching back into the shadowy underworld of 1970s Maple Creek. Detective Lena Hayes and Detective Ben Carter knew their next steps were crucial. They had to bridge the 4-decade gap, seeking out living witnesses whose memories, though faded, might still hold the fragments of truth. Their initial efforts focused on re-interviewing aging residents of Maple Creek, particularly those who lived near Art Peterson's last known route, or the industrial garage where his truck was found. It was a painstaking process, often yielding little more than hazy recollections and polite dismissals. Many residents were in their late 70s or 80s now. Some had moved away, and many had passed on, taking their potential insights with them. Lena, with her empathetic approach, understood the delicate nature of these interviews. People's memories of events from nearly 50 years ago were often unreliable, colored by time, personal experience, or simply the natural erosion of detail. Some were reluctant to speak, perhaps still harboring old fears from an era when local crime syndicates operated with less scrutiny. Lena and Ben listened patiently, sifting through anecdotes for any overlooked details or subtle inconsistencies that might have escaped the original investigators. They showed old photographs of Art, of the neighborhood, trying to jog reluctant minds. They also meticulously re-examined the original police reports, now digitized and more easily cross-referenced. These dated documents, filled with the language and limitations of 1970s policing, were a treasure trove of forgotten leads and untested theories. Among the hundreds of pages of interview logs and patrol notes, a seemingly minor detail caught Ben Carter's eye. An entry from the week before Art vanished mentioned a minor argument Art Peterson had with a co-worker named Glenn Peterson, no relation, at the Maple Creek post office. The report noted that Glenn had a reputation for being short-tempered and had been heard complaining about Art's meticulousness. Lena considered it. Let's not dismiss anything. It's a human element. If Art stumbled onto something, perhaps someone close to him or someone with a grudge could have been involved, or even been a witness they didn't realize was significant. As in any complex investigation, diversions and dead ends were inevitable. Testing the team's resolve and patience, they tracked down Glenn Peterson, now in his late 70s, living a quiet life in a small town 2 hours north of Maple Creek. When Lena and Ben arrived at his modest home, Glenn was initially defensive, his features hardening at the mention of the police. He seemed suspicious, his answers terse, his gaze shifting nervously. He still remembered Art, though his memories were tinged with a mild resentment about Art's by-the-book nature. Lena and Ben spent hours with Glenn, carefully probing his memory of August 1976. He acknowledged the argument, dismissing it as just a typical workplace spat. He couldn't recall much about the days immediately surrounding Art's disappearance. His evasiveness, while understandable given the shock of police presence after so many years, still raised a subtle red flag. They dug deeper. They checked his alibi from 1976. Glenn claimed he was on a fishing trip in northern Michigan that entire week. It was a common alibi, easy to fabricate. Lena and Ben painstakingly cross-referenced old motel records, fishing permits, and even interviewed distant relatives who confirmed his story. After intense questioning and careful verification of old records, Glenn Peterson's alibi was verified. He had genuinely been out of state, far from Maple Creek, when Art vanished. The initial suspicion, a nagging doubt, evaporated. The investigation returned to the ledger, the most tangible and explosive piece of evidence they possessed. The coded entries, painstakingly deciphered by Ben and the linguistic expert, painted a damning picture of a drug operation. And within those codes, a specific address appeared repeatedly, linked to the activities of the Duke and Slink, an old industrial garage unit. This garage, now dilapidated and boarded up, was located just a few blocks from where Art's mail truck had been found abandoned. It confirmed what Lena and Ben had suspected. Art's disappearance was directly connected to the illicit activities conducted at that very location. The property record showed that the garage had been owned by Roy Dubois, alias the Duke, in 1976. But the ledger held another secret, a dormant lead waiting to be awakened by a persistent touch. Old rental agreements for the garage unit from 1976 listed a tenant, an elderly man named Frankie the Fixer Costello. His name immediately flagged an old minor rap sheet from his younger days, petty theft, minor gambling infractions, suggesting a life on the fringes of legitimate society, but nothing that marked him as a violent criminal. What was significant was his proximity to Dubois and his garage in that era. Current records indicated that Frankie Costello, now in his mid-80s, resided in a local nursing home, a long-term care facility not far from Maple Creek. He was diagnosed with mild dementia, a challenging hurdle for any witness interview. However, the notes indicated he still had periods of lucidity, particularly when discussing events from his youth. Their visit to the nursing home was a delicate undertaking. Frankie Costello sat in a brightly lit common room, gazing out a window, seemingly lost in his own thoughts. He was frail, his hands gnarled with age, but his eyes, though clouded by time, held a flicker of sharp intelligence when he focused. When Lena and Ben introduced themselves as detectives from the Maple Creek Police Department, Frankie's initial reaction was a mixture of fear and evasiveness. His body language became guarded, his voice hushed. He clearly harbored a long-held secret, one that had been carefully buried beneath decades of silence. Lena approached him with soft-spoken empathy, careful not to overwhelm him. She explained they were investigating a very old case, the disappearance of a mailman named Art Peterson from 1976. She gently showed him a photograph of Art, then a picture of the old industrial garage. Frankie's eyes widened infinitesimally as he saw the garage photo. A visible shiver ran through his aged frame. "That place, bad business there," he mumbled, his gaze distant. "The Duke and Slink, mean fellas, didn't want no trouble from them." He remembered the Duke and Slink, their names laced with a palpable fear, even after all these years. He spoke in disjointed phrases about packages and shady dealings, always circling the edge of the truth without quite grasping it. The dilemma was acute. Frankie was clearly traumatized by what he knew, still terrified of retribution from men who, even if deceased or elderly, had once wielded immense power and fear. He had lived with this guilt and terror for decades, the burden of a secret weighing heavily on his soul. Lena understood that pushing too hard would only make him retreat further into his dementia. She shifted her strategy. Instead of interrogation, she offered reassurance. "Frankie," Lena said gently, placing a hand on his arm, her voice soft but firm. "Those men can't hurt you now. Slink is dead. And the Duke, Roy Dubois, he's an old man. You're safe here. We need your help to bring peace to a family who has waited nearly 50 years. For answers. Art Peterson was a good man. He deserves justice." She appealed directly to his conscience, to the basic human need for truth, even if it was delayed. Frankie's eyes, watery and distant, slowly found hers. He seemed to weigh her words, the empathy in her gaze, against the decades of fear that had kept him silent. A slow, agonizing process unfolded as he wrestled with his inner demons. Tears welled in his eyes, tracking paths down his wrinkled cheeks. He began to speak, haltingly at first, then with a growing urgency, as if a dam had broken. He described seeing Art Peterson on that fateful day, August 15th, 1976. Art, in his mailman uniform, was near the garage. Frankie was inside, tinkering with an old engine he was repairing, when he heard raised voices outside. He peeked through a crack in the garage door. Art was arguing heatedly with Roy Dubois and Silas Jenkins. Art had stumbled upon Dubois' drug operation, perhaps a large delivery being unloaded, or a substantial stash being moved within the garage. Frankie heard Art, his voice firm and unwavering, threaten to call the police to report them. Frankie's voice cracked as he recounted the escalation. He saw the confrontation turn physical, muffled shouts, the sounds of a struggle. Then, in a terrifying tableau, he saw Dubois and Silas Jenkins dragging Art's seemingly unconscious body back into the garage, out of sight. Frankie was paralyzed by fear, a quiet, insignificant man witnessing a terrible crime. He heard the mail truck's engine turn off, then the distinct sound of another vehicle starting up and leaving shortly after. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, what had just happened. He was too afraid to speak at the time, terrified of the notorious Duke and his ruthless enforcer, Silas. He had carried that secret, that immense burden, every single day since. Frankie Costello's confession, delivered in a trembling voice, was the missing piece, the eyewitness account that finally blew the case wide open. After 47 years, the truth of Art Peterson's disappearance, so long shrouded in mystery, was beginning to reveal its brutal, heartbreaking face. The relentless pursuit, the patience, and the meticulous work of Lena and Ben had finally found their target, a man living with a secret, haunted by a past he could no longer keep hidden. With Frankie Costello's agonizing confession, delivered in a trembling voice from the quiet confines of the nursing home, the final, chilling pieces of the puzzle clicked into place for detectives Lena Hayes and Ben Carter. 47 years of silence shattered, replaced by a brutal clarity, The full, heartbreaking picture of what happened to Arthur Peterson began to emerge, not as a random act, but as a calculated, desperate crime born of self-preservation. The narrative meticulously constructed by the cold case unit painted a grim scenario. On that fateful August 15th, 1976, Art Peterson, the dependable mailman, was making his final unusual delivery of the day, a special package to the dilapidated industrial garage on the edge of Maple Creek Park. This was not a routine stop, and as Art approached, he inadvertently stumbled upon Roy the Duke Dubois' illicit drug operation. Perhaps a large shipment of narcotics was being unloaded, or a significant stash was being moved or counted. Art, a man of unwavering integrity and strict adherence to the law, immediately recognized the gravity of what he was witnessing. He could not and would not look the other way. True to his character, he confronted them, his voice firm as he threatened to call the police and expose their criminal enterprise. Roy Dubois, a man driven by greed and a ruthless ambition to protect his lucrative business, instantly understood the threat Art posed. His operation was his lifeblood, and Art Peterson, the honest mailman, was an unforeseen and dangerous variable. Dubois immediately ordered his enforcer, Silas Slink Jenkins, a man known for his volatile nature and capacity for violence, to silence Art. Frankie Costello, the unsuspecting tenant, became the terrified eyewitness to the escalating confrontation. From his vantage point, he observed the argument intensify, heard the muffled shouts, and then watched in horror as the struggle turned physical. Dubois and Silas, in a horrifying tableau, overpowered Art Peterson, dragging his seemingly unconscious body back into the dark interior of the garage. Out of sight. Panic likely set in for Dubois and Jenkins. They had a body, a mailman, and a motive that would quickly unravel their entire operation if discovered. Their immediate concern would have been to eliminate any trace of Art and his connection to the scene. The mailbag, a distinct symbol of his postal service, would have been the first and most obvious piece of evidence to dispose of. In their haste, perhaps driven by adrenaline and fear of discovery, they didn't take it far. They simply threw the sturdy canvas bag into the sprawling, deep-root system of the ancient oak tree just a few blocks away, near where Art's truck was found. They hoped the earth would swallow it, that it would never be found, that time and nature would obliterate the evidence. As for Art's body, it was likely disposed of elsewhere, in a location chosen for its remoteness and the difficulty of discovery. Perhaps buried in a shallow grave on land Dubois owned, or submerged in a quarry, a common method for criminals seeking to make bodies vanish without a trace. The lack of a body had been the most agonizing absence for Art's family, the ultimate cruelty in a case already overflowing with sorrow. But the evidence didn't stop with Frankie Costello's powerful testimony. The forensic lab, working tirelessly, delivered another crucial piece of the puzzle, the DNA analysis from the half-smoked cigarette butt found in the mailbag's hidden compartment. While CODIS had not yielded a direct match, a familial search, conducted later did. A distant relative of Roy Dubois, whose DNA profile was in the system from an unrelated minor offense, provided the crucial link. The DNA from the cigarette butt, so remarkably preserved, was confirmed to belong to a male from the Dubois family line. This strongly indicated that Roy Dubois himself, or a very close male relative, was present at the scene. Given Dubois' known criminal enterprise and Frankie Costello's testimony, the DNA pointed directly to Roy Dubois, tying him unequivocally to the mailbag and, by extension, to the crime scene and Art Peterson's disappearance. With Frankie's first-hand account of the struggle, the meticulous deciphering of the drug ledger, and the compelling DNA evidence, Lena Hayes and Ben Carter had an airtight case. All leads now pointed directly to Roy the Duke Dubois, no longer just a shadowy name from old police files, but a living, breathing suspect. The time had come for the confrontation. Lena and Ben meticulously prepared, knowing that Dubois, a man who had successfully evaded justice for nearly 5 decades, would not be easily broken. He had built a life on a foundation of respectability, transforming from a small-time enforcer into a seemingly upstanding elderly businessman. They arrived at Roy Dubois' sprawling estate in the more affluent northern suburbs of Maple Creek. The property was immaculate, a stark contrast to the dilapidated garage that had been the scene of Art Peterson's last moments. Dubois, in his late 70s, greeted them at the door himself, a picture of polite if slightly wary benevolence. His silver hair was neatly combed, his clothes impeccably tailored. He embodied the image of a successful retired individual with nothing to hide. Lena, calm and resolute, wasted no time. "Mr. Dubois, we're here to discuss the disappearance of Arthur Peterson, a U.S. mail carrier, back on August 15, 1976. Dubois feigned ignorance, his expression morphing into one of mild confusion. "Peterson, the mailman? My goodness, that's a tragedy, isn't it? I vaguely remember something about that. Awful business, but I assure you I had nothing to do with it. I barely knew the man. He delivered to my business, I suppose, but that's it. He played the role of the benevolent elder, a man untainted by the dark shadows of the past." Ben Carter, silent until now, placed a large, sealed evidence bag on the pristine coffee table. Inside, visible through the clear plastic, was the heavily weathered, familiar canvas of Art Peterson's mailbag. Dubois' gaze flickered to the bag, and for a fleeting moment, a micro-expression of shock, quickly masked, crossed his face. Lena watched him intently. "This is Arthur Peterson's U.S. mail shoulder bag, Mr. Dubois. It was found buried in the roots of an oak tree in Maple Creek Park, just a few blocks from your industrial garage, where Art Peterson made his last known delivery on August 15, 1976. She continued, methodically laying out the evidence, each piece a hammer blow against Dubois' carefully constructed facade. "Inside this bag, Mr. Dubois, in a hidden, zippered compartment, we found this." Ben produced the small, leather-bound ledger encased in its own protective bag. "This ledger, Mr. Dubois, contains detailed records of drug transactions from the mid-1970s. Cryptic, yes, but we've had it fully deciphered. It clearly lists names and figures, including frequent references to the Duke, and the address of the industrial garage on Elm Street appears repeatedly, the garage you owned and operated in 1976. Dubois' composure began to crack. His eyes narrowed, his hands, once relaxed, now clenched into fists. "That's preposterous! Some old ledger found in a ditch? Anyone could have put it there. This is ridiculous. I've been a respected businessman for decades." The true blow, however, came with the mention of the eyewitness. Lena pulled out a tablet, showing a still image of Frankie Costello, his frail but determined face looking out from the screen. "And then, Mr. Dubois, there's Frankie Costello. He was your tenant in the adjacent unit at that garage. He has given a sworn statement. He saw Art Peterson, the mailman, confront you and Silas Jenkins on August 15th, 1976. He saw Art threaten to go to the police, and he saw you and Silas drag Art's unconscious body into your garage." The weight of the accumulated evidence became insurmountable. Dubois' veneer of respectability crumbled entirely. His face went pale, his eyes wide with a terror he could no longer conceal. He started to tremble, the smooth businessman replaced by a frightened old man. He stammered, trying to regain his footing, perhaps to blame the deceased Silas Jenkins entirely. "Silas! It was Silas! He was violent, he was unpredictable, he acted on his own. I just helped cover it up." The partial admission, a terrified breakdown confirming his presence and complicity, was enough. Dubois' desperate attempt to shift blame only cemented his involvement. The ledger, the DNA, Frankie's unwavering testimony, and now Dubois' own crumbling facade, it all pointed to his inescapable guilt. The truth, so meticulously buried, had finally come to light. With the confession, the brutal truth came to light, proving that persistence can break decades of silence. If you value stories of justice, leave your like and support our work. With Roy Dubois' terrified breakdown and partial admission, the decades-long silence surrounding Arthur Peterson's disappearance was finally, irrevocably broken. The long arm of justice, though slow, had finally reached its target. News of the breakthrough spread like wildfire through Maple Creek, captivating a community that had lived with the mystery for nearly half a century. Dubois was immediately arrested and charged with the murder of Arthur Peterson. The weight of the evidence against him was overwhelming. Art's mailbag with the hidden drug ledger, meticulously deciphered. The DNA evidence from the cigarette butt, linking him directly to the scene, and most damningly, the sworn testimony of Frankie Costello, the eyewitness who had lived with the horrifying secret for 47 years. The resolution of the case also brought a quiet but profound vindication for those wrongly scrutinized over the years. Glenn Peterson, Art's former co-worker, whose past argument with Art had briefly resurfaced as a potential lead, was officially cleared. Any lingering shadows of suspicion, however faint, that had touched his name over the decades were finally erased. For Sarah Peterson Miller and Emily Davies, the news of Dubois' arrest was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions: shock, anger, relief, and an overwhelming sense of finality. The police, acting on Dubois' reluctant admission during his interrogation, launched a search near an old quarry that Dubois had once owned, a remote, forgotten corner of his past properties. It was here, in a shallow, long-forgotten grave, that Arthur Peterson's remains were finally discovered. After 47 years, Art was coming home. A quiet, dignified burial was arranged for Arthur Peterson. It was a solemn but deeply cathartic moment, attended by Sarah, Emily, their extended family, and a scattering of old friends and neighbors from Maple Creek who still remembered the kind mailman. The simple wooden coffin, adorned with a spray of white roses, represented not just a final farewell, but the reclaiming of a life that had been stolen. Sarah, her eyes red but resolute, placed a small, new mailbag pin onto the coffin, a symbol of Art's dedication and the quiet integrity that had ultimately led to his demise. Emily, her face etched with a bittersweet peace, gently placed the original handwritten note Art had left on their fridge that fateful morning. "Love you, Em. See you at 5:30. Dinner on me tonight," now carefully preserved within a protective case beside him. The case of Arthur Peterson became a powerful testament to the unwavering dedication of cold case investigators and the relentless march of forensic science. It underscored a fundamental truth: no case is truly ever cold if there's a family still seeking answers, or a single clue, no matter how small or deeply buried, waiting to be unearthed. The resolution resonated deeply within the Maple Creek community, bringing a sense of collective relief and a renewed belief in the enduring power of justice. It served as a powerful reminder that every life has value and every story deserves its ending, no matter how long it takes to be told.